Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm Adi Darami and I have here in the studio my co-host, Mr. Momodu Mboj. Mr. Mboj, as ever, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Adi.
Thank you. And as I said, the show is called The Week in Review and it's exactly what it says on the tin. We look back over 10 big stories from the week and we go, and some get a bit longer time spent on them than others. So we look at the floods in Banjo. We look at the Vice President addressing an ECOWAS delocalized meeting. I know, I'd never heard of the word either. Using local produce to produce local vegetables and fruits to produce baby foods. And we also have a sporting story, a bit of a football fairy tale. Anyway, that's the show in a nutshell, so let's get cracking, shall we? First one up, I remember growing up at this time of the year, my palms would get sweaty and I'd be very, very worried. Why? Because exam results were out. This time it's from the West Africa Examination Council. Have a look.
As a sector, I think we are very impressed with the results. Not to say that we are celebrating results. By this I mean we are impressed because this is the moment we would have been expecting to see the reflection of the consequences of COVID-19. Remember when it hit these students presently who just started to it were in grade 10, grade 11, and therefore they had interrupted class sessions.
Impressed but not celebrating, Mr. Mboj. Were you impressed or celebrating or neither?
Absolutely, I've got here impressed but not celebratory. He's not in a celebratory mood.
Quite.
Wow, that was an interesting thing to say. When he said COVID-19, I said, all right, but this affected all the members.
Yes.
So let's put that one aside.
Sure.
So let's see now the results, what effects. We compare, you know, each country and see what's up.
Because I know you've been doing some deep digging.
Absolutely, because one needed to contextualize, isn't it, to really understand it.
Indeed.
So here, what do we have? Out of the 15,360 candidates,
Sure.
only 605 obtained credits, passes in five subjects, you know, including English and mathematics.
That's correct.
This is important because this is a general requirements to go into university.
This is true.
It's an important benchmark.
That's correct.
So everything he said, we improved here, we improved there, granted,
Sure.
but really the significant detail here is really this one.
Sure.
And let's think about it, Adi. Whether I want to go to university or not, we must really insist on that every student must really achieve this.
Sure.
It is not simply for university intake, but citizenship.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. So there must be that high threshold, as it were, to try for everybody to get it. And how did we perform last year? Only 5.75%.
That's right.
I went to Nigeria, I looked, 76%.
Yeah.
So
quite,
got this five
that's right.
credits, including English and mathematics.
That's right.
I looked around, they've all had some...
Yes, we struggled to find Sierra Leone. I must admit, I also could not find Sierra Leone.
to find that, but
Sure.
the few that I've seen.
Sure.
So, and this is not really about numbers.
No, sure.
Don't bring me about size. Sure. It's about the quality of your education.
This is it.
You see, and I'm sure you can think of a smaller country with comparable or even better, you know what I mean, results. And here I'm not giving you an invitation.
I know. I won't go there.
there.
I won't go there. I won't go there. But you're right, because later on in that same interview, the gentleman went on to say that people criticize the quality of the teachers, and he said, I think the figure he quoted, and I wish I had played the clip, was that 93% of them were highly qualified. Is I think the term he used, and so he was using this to kind of rebut. But we've discussed this before about these qualifications when you look at the results, and the Nigeria one really is very, very stark. It's not about size of Nigeria, it's about the quality of teaching, and Ghana I think also had pretty good results as well. So it does make you wonder, and in being impressed but not celebrating, I was neither impressed nor was I celebrating, I have to be honest.
And where did he get that statistic? Who conducted that survey?
Sure.
Everybody can access the World Bank Economic Update 2022,
true. Yes.
and they touched on education.
Indeed.
We are pretty good with recruiting, getting them that input. But the quality of the teachers, that's really woeful.
Yeah.
In fact, there was one study that indicated that only about 1%, or was it 0.1%, were really qualified, were really competent in English and mathematics as it were to teach it.
Is right.
Woeful statistic there. And when it comes to learning outcomes, poor the results. Really, they show that. So let us be realistic with our situation, of course. PS, the person we saw there, the permanent secretary, of course, will try to put a positive spin on it, gloss it a bit and stuff like that, one understands. But let us be honest, there's a huge problem here.
And pretending it's not there is not going to make it go away, is it?
Like the ostrich, I mean, others can see you. I mean, you may not be able to see others, but others can see you. So there's really nowhere to hide. These results really...
I would have liked to come out and say, these are shocking. Yes, COVID had an impact. But again, as you said, we looked at other countries and the comparison doesn't flatter us at all. And because of that, this is the internet age. We can always go online and compare. And we did that.
And it's deeper than COVID-19.
Of course.
This is where we need to be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
Right now, the only reason we're talking about institutional reform and all the rest of it is because the institutions really virtually collapsed. They're not fit for purpose. Otherwise, why are we talking about that? So we need to go back there. I was at QIT for a long time, the Tertiary Institute. So we were receiving the products of the secondary school, absolutely. And I couldn't believe it. It was just unbelievable.
Well, you should see some of the CVs we get from people applying for, and some of them are university graduates.
Yes, and you would, some of them, you'll look at their results, is really glowing stuff within. But again, when you talk to them and when you test them, you're wondering, how did they get all of these A's? What are the teachers doing? What's going on? Sometimes we've had reason to meet with schools and the like. You listen to some teachers, you wonder, oh my God, you yourself, you need teaching. You really cannot teach. Something like that. So we know the deep-seated issues. This didn't begin yesterday or with the COVID. They've been here for a long time, and I have to say it, when we go back to our previous regime, this is the legacy we need to deal with, hence the need for reform. Duh, you know what I mean?
I mean, we're talking about security sector reform, etc. We need to reform the education system, surely.
Absolutely, this is unbelievable.
So as parents, I hope people can feel our concern, and we really need to get a grip on this, because it's far too important to just brush it off and saying, we're impressed but not celebrating. We should be neither.
And we are, and everybody's implicated in this. Not simply the Ministry of Education. We understand what their problems are, but maybe it's difficult to just come out and really say them in the stark form that they are. So that is it. But we understand the issues. Parents as well, you take responsibility. You should show care. You should
PTA meetings
care
and the like.
About the studying, the person studying, PTA meetings, and that sort of thing. You must do that as well. Everybody has a role.
Don't just leave it to the school and leave it to the teacher.
Leave it to the school and that's it.
Parents, if you want your kids to learn, pay attention to their education. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now we've had, as many people watching events in the Gambia, devastating floods. And so we've got two stories coming up about the floods. First one is about the flooding in Banjo. Have a look.
Kabrin jiodunta mol la bungo kono ye mol nati nanjang ika mol topoto nka dumorol ke tunya manfem manki jang kairo be jang fengo be jang ilota moli.
Since we were brought here, our condition is good. There is enough food, water and shelter. We have been well taken care of.
The National Assembly member for Banjul North, Modulamin Ba, says a well-coordinated relief effort made it possible to give affected families shelter, food and water.
There you had our colleague Gajaga talking about people saying they got food, shelter, etc. and water. Ironically, water. But Mr. Mboj, of course, if you are somebody who's been flooded out, this can only be temporary accommodation. They're housed in a school, including your alma mater, some of them, St. Augustine's. We're in August, September around the corner, the schools reopen. what are they going to do? How can some of them get back to their homes?
That's exactly it. In our report, that was actually the last question.
Indeed.
So one would hope that we've got plans for that. Where that would come from, I'm not really sure. We know that government authorities were very much involved in this, particularly the Red Cross, Gambia Red Cross Society was so much involved in
very
it
much
as
so.
well. So possibly they will work in tandem for that stage. I cannot imagine them not doing so, knowing what we know. This is a school and people are going to come back soon. So this is it. That's the sort of thing you like to hear, for instance. This was a sort of relief humanitarian intervention given what happened. So according to one of the victims there, saying that yes, everything, the basic things that they needed, they were receiving them.
Sure.
So
and what you tend to get in richer countries, which obviously we are not, is they would also get some kind of psychosocial help. Because it's just human nature. The most comfortable sleep you will ever have is in your own bed. And when you are taken out of that, you're forced out of it. It's not as if you went on holiday somewhere. A natural disaster has forced you out of your home. That psychologically can also be have quite an effect on you.
Absolutely. And I understand that the Red Cross, they're trying to provide that.
That's correct.
That's it. For them, it's not simply giving cash. I think maybe we will come to that later, and providing certain essential items, but they try to make sure that you have access to clean water.
That's right.
They think about sanitation, you know, the hygiene stuff. And they also provide some kind of health care. I understand that at St. Augustine's, they had that mobile clinic.
That is correct.
And the ambulance was at hand.
That's right.
So it's more of a holistic. So one would hope that they will continue to work with the government and others, because they seem to be so resourceful.
Well, indeed,
interesting, you know. Somehow they respond to all sorts of things. And this was what I think they did. What needs assessment?
They did a needs assessment indeed.
In a very short period.
Yeah, very speedily done.
It's speedily done. It tells you how organized they are.
That's right.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that concludes that story, but it takes us nicely onto the next one, because Mr. Mboji's kind of mentioned it already. And this again was the Red Cross. And just to say, as I'm about to introduce this, that this happened in the week when we celebrate and commemorate World Humanitarian Day. And of course, they are probably the most well-known humanitarian organization. So they had some impact and they had some input into what happened with flood victims. Have a look.
This is a moment of joy and relief for disaster victims. The Gambia Red Cross Society is rolling out a relief package to 606 households to dampen the socio-economic shocks of the recent flash floods. Some of these beneficiaries' houses were completely or partially destroyed or heavily flooded with rainwater. Through cash transfer via Q-Money, the victims are receiving food and shelter support from the Gambia Red Cross Society.
And there you had our colleague Mahmoud Lamin Choi. Mr. Mboj, in an instance where I mentioned, you know, you want to sleep in your own bed. If your house has been destroyed, everything washed away, you have no money. That's the next worry. Now we have Q-Money working with Gambia Red Cross, and they're providing, again, the Red Cross. I can't kind of big them up enough, really. They're doing a sterling job. And you mentioned the needs assessment, and I think this is where that came in particularly.
Absolutely. I can remember, and I really do not want to romanticize the past, when people sort of face this crisis, as it were, your neighbors will take you on.
Yeah, quite.
Very, very easily. But when you're faced with a certain scale, or even the neighbor,
where even your neighbor
the neighbor is struggling, him or herself. So this is a situation we are in now. So even the neighbor, what the society used to do itself, as it were, now it can't. So we rely so much now on NGOs, CSOs, and government interventions, and that sort of thing.
That's it. And as you said, in the talking about the previous story, they did this needs assessment. 606 families were identified, and then they had different levels of help that they're going to be given. And it's for period of time, some for a month, some for 2 months, but they broke it down into different types of help for different types of families, and I thought they did a fantastic job.
Absolutely, and that's the only thing that they can.
Yeah, quite.
This is really a relief, if you like, support, as it were.
That's
so
right.
it has to end soon.
Sure.
So another, as it were, body, another mechanism, another structure, whatever, will have to take on from there and see how they can resettle people.
Well,
so now that's going to be the next
that's
question.
That's going to be the big next question and the next big challenge.
The next big challenge.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And so that's Gambia Red Cross. And now on to our fourth story. There's something called a delocalized meeting happening here in the Gambia. We might get on to explaining what that is about. And the Vice President, Badara Aliyu Diouf, was there and he addressed the meeting. Here's some of what he had to say.
We should promote development democracy rather than putting a lot of emphasis on political democracy, which leads to disunity and dysfunctionalism of the system. So promote development democracy. We don't need conflict in the ECOWAS region. The cost of war is more expensive than the price of peace.
And I wish I had coined that phrase. The cost of war is more expensive than the price of peace. A beautiful turn of phrase there from a Vice President. But Mr. Mboj, he mentioned something there and he had me scrambling around. He talked about development democracy and not political democracy, hinting that political democracy necessarily leads to conflict. But it doesn't always, does it?
No, not necessarily. That was very interesting there about the politics, the cost of war, and the price of that.
Quite.
And we also know that war is also politics by other means.
Indeed.
So let us brace ourselves that there will be conflict.
Look, I was going to say he has to be one of the most optimistic people in the world if he can say, as he said to that conference, that we should not be using violence as a means to resolve differences. The only way that will stop is if every human being on the planet is killed. This has been the human way since mankind has been on the earth.
That's it. And we are also told that peace is not really the absence of violence, it is the presence of justice.
Indeed.
Oh, that's a very difficult one.
It really is.
Really, so we know that it's almost like war or conflict is almost organic to political life.
Sure.
Yes? So how do we minimize?
That's right.
This is the best that we can do, I say, minimization of risks.
Sure.
So he talks about this developmental. There have been some studies done on this. I think since Amartya Sen, he won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1998, and he really changed the mindset in many ways of the World Bank and the IMF. Yes. Remember what they did to us in the 80s?
The kind of all these
with
very strict,
austerity,
yes,
with the austerity stuff.
Sure.
So developmental democracy doesn't simply end with the political and civil liberties.
Sure.
It talks about economic rights,
that's right.
Equalities, social justice.
That's right. And I think if you dig deeper, if people dig deeper, he says that they can exist together. It's not a case of one without the other.
One without the other. Absolutely. But for me, my worry was, we've discussed this before, this thing about development and democracy, even the juxtaposition. I'm wondering, isn't democracy more of a conservative concept? It's so slow. You need to negotiate. I can't force anything. You might even have short-term horizons because in 5 years you're going to go back to your mandate is only for 5 years. That sort of thing. Whereas development may require us to take very radical decisions.
Indeed. That's right.
So some people do say that perhaps these two sit uneasily.
Well, Singapore is the model that is usually thrown.
Absolutely. But what did Lee Kuan Yew say? For that kind of development, I need less democracy.
That's right.
We are scandalized. We don't quote him in that same way.
Is true.
Absolutely. So
for
me, I prefer democratic development, what he's saying. But I understand that it's going to be extremely slow.
Sure, it will be slow.
No radical stuff.
exactly.
Painfully slow. And democracy is, the gains are piecemeal.
Well, this is it.
Incremental.
And of course, the reason he was addressing this meeting, and I'll try and explain, delocalized, is that the parliament, which normally sits in Abuja, has moved itself to the Gambia, to Banjo.
Roaming.
And exactly. And so they say they're actually taking the parliament to the people, and they'll be taking it to different countries. It's Banjo's turn this time. And of course, the reason why the Vice President mentioned it is because in our West African sub-region, we have 3 countries that are still under military rule because of coup d'etat. And so this is why he particularly was referencing them, really, saying that, this kind of violence has to end if we want to develop our countries.
But let's be honest, come on, ECOWAS, AU, these things, but they really have no teeth. Let's be honest with ourselves. Yeah. Take the parliament, for instance. They don't make laws.
Indeed.
You know what I mean? Whatever they say, they are texts and all the rest of it, they are merely advisory.
Well, indeed.
So it all depends on what is going on within the member states.
Sure.
So how much influence are they having there? Because when we spoke to Honorable Snow, exactly, who is the chairman of this joint committee, he was always sort of pointing to Gambia, what they did, and they say, yeah, that was a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, indeed.
You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely fantastic. But when you look generally, when it comes to security, we're all talking about it, the jihadist threat, with the Boko Haram over there, Niger, Mali, just around the corner. Yeah. We can see the effects.
State in the Sahel and so on.
Absolutely. Sure. So you have all of these problems. Yeah. And because member states are not willing to share enough authority with these bodies to make them effective. They are not right now. They will not be effective. So yes, they will continue to massage the situation. That's essentially what they're doing now. Advice here, these small pickings like Gambia, you pick
and hold it up as
success. Yeah, but this is really the structural problem, and it's also the problem with the AU. So what are we going to do? Let's just sort of humble on. I don't know.
I think reform, that's our word again. We have to reform if we want it to have teeth. Because if we say we want these organizations to be effective, then we have to change them, because they've been pretty ineffective thus far, despite what they hold us up as being their successes, really. They've been pretty ineffective.
For that reform to come, and in the longer term, I'm absolutely hopeful it will come, but we need a great leader. This is really a question of leadership. Somebody of a stature of a Nelson Mandela or something similar. Really, you do have these great leaders who initiate things.
Sure.
Our independence and around, you have people like Nkrumah and others who did that. But there's we'll talk about it, a neo-independence, we call it. There's a new cadre of leadership that you need who can get things done. It's the implementation stage, isn't it? I'm not sure whether we've got it in Africa
ECOWAS.
Today. I have to be honest.
And we don't have it in ECOWAS.
I have to be honest with you.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. There's some food for thought. Thank you for that. And this takes us to our 5th story, and one I particularly like. There's a training course just recently concluded where they're using locally grown fruit and vegetables to make baby food. Have a look.
Duñ xam te ñun léegi dañ bugg a jigéen yi paquet di jaay supermarket yi.
What we want now is for women engaged in this business to package and sell in the supermarkets. These foods are highly nutritious and good for the baby's health. This is the type of business we want to encourage in this country. I also wish to thank the GCCI leadership for the support they continue to give us.
Aissatou Badji of Kungujang Ketaya, one of several women undergoing this training, calls on other women to support this crusade either by joining the business or buying locally made baby food.
Our colleague Esonyasi there telling us join the business or buy locally made baby food. Mr. Mboch, this is one of these things similar to the thing that we discussed about mud huts. People get aspirational, and they seem to think that buying the kind of processed baby food that's nicely packaged, usually from the West, shows that you're somehow moving on up. And yet, the cheaper, fresher alternative, which is probably better, doesn't get bought, and so this is what this is trying to change, and it's quite a sea change that they're trying to bring about.
Yes, it was a bit like when we were going to school and your clothes. Those who had clothes sent from England or America, they called it ready-made.
Ready-made, yeah.
So the stuff done by tailors here, that was too local. But again, when you are in Britain, you would know that bespoke tailoring, that's really the upper
that
class
was
stuff.
The height of it.
So you see the madness.
It is totally the madness. And you know, in another country I went to recently, I was impressed to see that locally made shoes were celebrated in a way where growing up that was quite the opposite. It was the ready-made shoes that were, you know, celebrated and you know, sort of hankered over, you know. So yes, this thing is something that really it should be logical, that, you know, locally made, locally grown, you know, locally made from locally grown should be fantastic, and that's what we should be aspiring to.
It's the bespoke stuff.
That is the bespoke.
It's really quite superior.
Isn't it? You know.
Oh, come on.
You know.
Absolutely. So we've got to have that support. As always, we say, how do we create the economy?
Indeed, indeed.
You see, this is it. Because you don't want to be in a situation, in a trap, where once you launch these things, it's done. That's it. It has to work with other sectors, as it were.
Because there's quite a sort of chain that has to be established, and so you hope that they're not just going to be producing this and they haven't already thought about, you know, how's it going to be marketed, how's it going to be sold, etc., etc. All of that needs to be part of the package. Otherwise, the thing will flop.
Absolutely, and perhaps even connected to GCCI to some extent, because it's a huge also awareness program. There's something else that we should be doing, a different kind of communication, as it were, to create the market.
Well, this is it. I know GCCI have their annual trade fair, and I did say to my colleagues upstairs in QTV, I said, at the next trade fair, we'll be looking to see whether some of these products are there being exhibited, and it would be good to see that if they are.
That's it. And I don't want it simply to be for some poor, like those are the low-income bracket.
No, quite.
I want the richest person to think that, oh, this is good enough, this is what I want to buy. See, this is, I'm thinking that level. So when I saw everybody involved in this, I was like, oh, where's the Standards Bureau?
Yeah, quite you know,
that sort of thing, to be integrated regarding
FSQA and so on.
Integrate everything into the training from day one.
That's correct.
That sort of thing. But this is what we want to see. More local industries.
Indeed, and yes, and it could provide, prove rather to be quite a lucrative one if it's done well.
And one wonders, is there a coordinating mechanism, as it were, directing these entrepreneurs, these businesses in certain areas where things are on the tap, as it were? You must have that coordinating body.
That's the kind of magic word you've used as entrepreneurs. Not everybody is a natural born entrepreneur, and so people sometimes need guidance to say, you know, you haven't done this before, but think about it, and you know, and who knows if with the proper guidance, mentorship, and so on, it could be prove to be quite worthwhile.
That's it, and you will help people. You will look at the market and see where investment is needed more. You know what I mean? So perhaps you might avoid overcrowding. Then, you know, you're all losers. So there must be that coordinating mechanism, that body, that would be, you know, pushing, like playing traps, as it were.
Indeed. So
pushing pieces in the right direction, as it were.
I think a thumbs up from both of us for that one. So thank you, Mr. Mboj. And that brings us nicely to the halfway point. And we'll take a break. And after the break, we will have 5 more stories. So don't go away. Join us after this break.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, the Gambia's trusted network.
You won't believe it. Welcome back. You're watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. Now you won't believe it, but look at Mr. Mboja and I, we were once both youths. Honestly, we were. Now, I say this in the lead up to the next story because on the 12th of August around the world, it was International Youth Day. And in the Lower River region, they also commemorated it in some fashion. Have a look.
Yeah, especially in Algeria, I was working with one Arab man. He was having a farm, so I experienced a lot there. So when I came back, I decided, look, before I go out to sit at Combo where I was born, so I think I have to go back to my final destination. You know, that's where I was, where my parents were born. That's here, LRR. So I came here. I talked to my dad, and he talked to his people. Then we requested a land. Then I started doing something in venture into agribusiness. The advice that I will give the youth, let the youths, not only returnees, all the entire youths of the Gambia. Gambia is the only country where you know you will wake up early in the morning, 7 o'clock up to 2 or 3 o'clock at night. We will be at the camp drinking attire. I only see it in the Gambia here. Although, but let's us just try to be in something. Although you cannot just wake up one day, you dig a well, that the same day you fetch water there and you drink that water. Practically impossible.
You get up and all day all you do is brew attire. I only see it here in the Gambia. I love that, and that's why I had that clip. But I also had that clip because, Mr. Mbo, you also used a clip of that young man on the radio.
Absolutely.
And he had quite something to say, both his life story and his words of advice for fellow youngsters. But as I said, it was International Youth Day. That's what was being commemorated, and that's why we spoke to them, and aspirations and so on, and achievements. And for me, I wanted it in the story because on the news because I thought it was quite an inspiring example.
Yes, an experience. Because when he said that in Libya,
Algeria,
he walked to the farm.
A farm. That's
so
right.
he had learned few things. Imagine if he hadn't had that experience.
Quite.
There's a moot point there. So I put all of that together. So that's it. So when he came with that knowledge, that experience, was born in the Combos, said, let me go to my ancestral, if you like, to our village and do this. Right. So absolutely, you've got some people are like that. Isn't it called self-efficacy? Some people can take decisions. I'm going to do this and get up and do it, as it were. Yes. But did you find others who really can't?
Well, so there are many. I admire him, and as I said, there was a reason why we wanted him featured because all of us who saw the story, we admired what had happened to him because like others, he was trying to go on this backway journey. He only got as far as Algeria. And then, had to come back. And he thought, I'm not going to come back and kick my heels and mope about the fact that I didn't cross over to Europe. I'm going to do something about it. And what he's done about it is exactly what we just saw there.
Absolutely. That's the only long-term solution, really. Yes, what can government do? We'll keep on celebrating sort of these examples, these things that we see. But the larger problem is really still an issue. Sure. A lot of people complain about Gambian youth. We are not doing this, we are not doing that. The education system, youth unemployment is so high. We are trying to teach them entrepreneurship, but as you said earlier, not many people are entrepreneurs. So while I'll celebrate that, the larger difficulty is not lost.
There are, because we've also been trying to promote TIVET. We're trying to say, you drive along any road, you see lots of these garages where people just kind of pitch up and start fiddling with your car. Sometimes they fix it, sometimes they don't. A lot of young people, and some of them are not particularly trained. They've kind of done it by guesswork, and they've managed to learn a few things here and there, including one who fixed my car this morning, by the way. So he looks about 12 or 13. There are these things, other things, and so on a day like International Youth Day, of course, it brings it to mind, particularly in the Gambia, as you say, high level of youth making these perilous crossings and sometimes not getting there, rather than trying to do something here, get a skill here, or as you said, not everybody's an entrepreneur.
How do we structure it?
Yeah, sure. It's a difficult one.
It's a very, very difficult one. Sure. So anybody can just get up and start and whatever you do. So organizationally, what should be in place sort of isn't in place.
Sure.
So that is the issue. How can the state help in this? Other societies have reached this sort of stage in their history, we've seen it.
Sure.
So how can the state come in and sort of trying to bring this within the formal sector? That's what they've been trying to do.
For the longest time. Yeah.
That's it. So they've been trying to do it for the longest time. So these are some of the challenges that we face now. For how long, I really don't know.
Yeah, so but next year we'll be celebrating or commemorating International Youth Day, and perhaps we'll have lots of success stories to talk about, I hope.
Well, for me, we've been talking about the youth bulge, youth dividend.
Quite, you know, that the majority of the population fall under the youth category, etc.
That's it, within 15, 35, whatever.
That's right.
But when we look around, for some of us, we're very worried.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, the social unrest that can emerge from having this youth no job.
We look at Sierra Leone just recently.
Absolutely,
you know,
yes.
And that's definitely a lot of that was to do with exactly that kind of things, you know. But yeah. So,
absolutely. So whilst this story is fantastic, but we need that critical mass
this is
of
it.
these
Not
stories.
just one or two.
Not just one or two. This trickle, you know, once in a while. We've been doing this, covering these things for a long time. But again, when we talk about the aggregate stuff, we are disappointed with it.
Sure. I'd love one day for us to interview somebody and he said, you know, I did this because I saw a news report on QTV about some person you interviewed, and that changed my mind.
Fantastic.
I would love that.
Absolutely.
I would love that.
That's the idea.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Umbridge. And on to our seventh story. The Gambia Police Force have been training, and it's training conducted by the Turkish National Police. And it's about human rights and also countering hate crime. Here's a clip.
This training is very important in pursuit of our vision, our mission, and based on our core values and our constitutional mandate, as you can see on the poster behind the high table.
Mustafa Ayala, the lead trainer from the Turkey police, revealed that the training's main topics are hate crimes and human rights, which he believes the law enforcement officers can help prevent and protect respectively.
I would like to reaffirm that this has been a productive training activity with significant outcomes. We have shared valuable experiences on countering hate crimes and human rights in policing.
And someone from the Turkish police force who was here training our folks, Mr. Umbridge. Hate crime apparently was what they spent most of the training time on, but also about protecting and human rights. And we had a discussion about this both in the office and on Drive Time, which is a radio program, by the way, on Q Radio. And we kind of went into it in some detail. And I was trying to say that I know they go around the world giving this type of training, but there's not a lot of what I would term hate crime and in the Gambia. It's not that I'm being complacent, but there isn't really, you know, kind of homophobic crimes or racist crimes. So there's not a lot of ethnic-based crime, you know, where you target one ethnic group or another. There isn't a lot of that here. But nonetheless, I guess because we don't want to be complacent, that's why our police do need to go and do this kind of training. Absolutely.
And recently on social media, isn't it, especially during the elections, you know, like it appeared as if you know, we sort of questioned really how ripe it was.
Because hate speech can lead to hate crime.
That sort of thing. Yes. So, yes, that's one part, you know. But for me, I looked at the other part, the human rights policing. I thought about, what do you mean by human rights policing there? Sort of, and what's been our experience
Sure.
Yeah. Would you respect sort of what they call principles of legality? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And more importantly, necessity.
Quite.
Minimum force required to perform a task. How many times have we seen somebody isolated, 3 or 4 officers around, hitting you? They didn't realize it, beating you.
Sure.
It's unnecessary.
Right.
So this is what we are talking about.
It's almost as if you've been convicted and this is your punishment.
This is your punishment.
Yeah.
It is that reflex. I know as Gambians, Africans, I can even say that. It is, we have that reflex to sort of punish sort of bad behavior. Maybe at your house, even there are some bodies now saying that you cannot do that to your children. In some countries, it's against the law.
Sure.
But once I've got the uniform, I've gone out there. Part of being professional, really, is to just forget about, you know, how I think that it should be done.
Sure.
You have to become somebody else. So this is the problem.
As you said, the human rights angle is probably the most crucial.
It's going to be very difficult.
Because we're trying to get out of a kind of mindset that the security forces had gotten into over those 22 years of, you know, the previous regime, where, you know, they were both judge, jury and executioner, literally in some cases. And so they now have to get out of that mentality and say, well, you know, this is not how we do have to respect people's human rights.
That's it, and that's such a huge demand from them, because normatively, actually, if you don't hit, then you're not bringing up your children right.
Yeah, quite.
So that's really a very powerful mindset, really. So they're going to have to sort of fight against themselves.
Against this kind of societal norms.
Against this kind of societal norms. This is really what our issue is, isn't it, Ade?
Sure.
Institutionally, because of the colonial experience and our education and all of these things. So institutionally, we want to be one thing, but normatively, we have certain attitudes that undermine what we want to be.
Sure.
There's a crack at the heart of our society. We experience these things all the time.
I remember having an argument with somebody when I told them that I didn't hit my son. He said, "That's not very African of you."
You see, stuff like
and
that.
this was in London. I was like, you know, when my son was very, very young, I never hit him, you know, and he's grown up to be a wonderful 37-year-old guy, you know, so, you know, and I'm pleased about the fact that he didn't need that, but, you know, you might say, oh, that's a one-off, but really we don't need that. But as you said, if these people who are policemen and women come from the society, then of course they are reflective of the society.
Absolutely.
And if the society believes that if somebody is suspected of beating somebody or doing something, they did a beating, you know, we see mob justice sometimes. Somebody yells thief and they catch somebody and they don't worry about even taking them to the police, give a good beating.
Absolutely.
So if you've come from that society where you feel that an accusation is as good as a conviction, then of course these are the things you have to fight against.
Absolutely. And let's remember, Ade, in the West they also had corporal punishment.
Yeah.
You see, what changed afterwards, which I think they tend to do and we don't do so much, is that with more knowledge on child psychology, one could see the damage that it was doing to these kids and stuff like that. Then somehow the society can assimilate you know, what we get from psychology and the like. But our societies are not like that. For us, it's more about our proverbs, our customs, our traditions. So we are not incorporating new knowledge.
No.
You know what I mean? Into my body of beliefs, into my conduct, my attitude, you know, as they say, turning ideas into habits.
Yeah, this is it.
So we are not doing that. So the people who tend to do would be perhaps, I don't know, westernized, middle class, educated from elsewhere.
They pejoratively refer to as tubab.
Absolutely.
Because they tried to do those things.
You realize, so we've given the devil the best tune. This is what we used to say. It's just extraordinary. That's the colonial legacy, the colonial mindset. These are some of the things that we need to fight against in many ways. That's the final frontier.
It really
That's really
is
where the battle is.
That is. And it's a big battle.
It's a huge battle.
It's a big battle. But thank you for that. So to our police, we hope you're going to benefit from this training. As people always say at the end of the training, I will really benefit from this training and I will really implement it in my job. Well, I hope you do. Thank you, Mr. Mboj.
What actions will you change?
This is it.
It's all in the
that
action.
will be the acid test. Thank you. And that takes us on to our 8th story. And there's another round of COVID-19 vaccinations happening. And so we went out and we spoke to the public saying, what do you think about this? Well, here's some of what they told us.
Mbari C, the regional vaccination officer for LRR, states that more than 54% of the people in his region have been vaccinated and stressed the importance of immunization.
If you look at vaccination, it has been going on in the Gambia since 1979 with the establishment of the extended program on immunization. There are a lot of diseases that were in sub-Saharan Africa here that was a burden before, but now we hardly see those diseases. It's because of immunization that we were able to eradicate some, and we were able to eliminate some, and we were able to control some. So immunization is very, very, very important, and it's not a new thing.
And perhaps we should call it COVID-19 immunization, and that might take away some of the, because there's this whole thing about vaccine. Part of it is to do with the fact that people felt that how on earth can they have found a vaccine so quickly? And then of course you hear stories about second and third and boosters, and they're thinking, hang on a minute, if it's meant to be, why do I need a second or a third and a booster? Big battle, Mr. Ambrose, to kind of get the public to change its perception and get to this 70%. I was quite impressed when that chap said in his region 54% must be one of the highest in any region in the country.
Absolutely. I mean, contemporary society, technology, social media, all sorts of things.
All of the above.
all of the above. And even perhaps the breakdown of traditional society. Sure. There's something also going on along that level. We're all becoming sort of more individualistic in our own ways, even though on the social media we form bunkers and silos, as it were.
And we go into groups that end up being an echo chamber, where people are saying the same thing to each other and exactly. Kind of echoing each other's thoughts.
So societies have drastically changed. I mean, he said there 1975, we've been doing this in 1975. I wonder what percentage of our population were born in 1975. Very, very small.
It's small.
Absolutely. So this is it. This is the battle now they're going to face, as we discussed on drive time. From March till now, 18.5%.
Quite. And from now till December 4 months, you've got
what chance
to hit that 70% mark.
That's it. What would miraculously turn around? What kind of miraculous turnaround? Because that's really what you need.
Yeah, sure. I spoke to one of our colleagues, and I was telling him about the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. And he said, of course, they also have the kind of immunization here. And he said, as a new parent, he suddenly has seen the value of this, and he wants his child, and in fact his child already has been given those immunization jabs, and he said, he cringes when he sees the needle go into his daughter's arm, but nonetheless he knows that this is for her benefit. And we discussed the thing about perhaps if they called it immunization rather than vaccination, people would go along with it better than they have done so far.
Yes, that matters. That's a good point. That's a valid point. Even in communications, it depends on what you call it.
Indeed,
people respond to some names better than on others. And another curious point was the Red Cross agent there saying that, well, students seem more open to this, but the community in denial, which got me thinking, who's got the final say here, whether to take the jab or not? Because the 12-year-old is still a minor. Because you can get it from 12 wherever.
I did wonder that when I heard it.
Yes. The 12-year-old is a minor. Who's going to decide? In all likelihood, the parent.
The parent.
So
if you're saying the parents, which it implies, the parents are the reluctant ones, so are they giving the green light for their children to be vaccinated, and they're choosing not to?
Absolutely. So how is that bit handled? One would imagine that be it CSO or government, schools, whoever, there would be this mediating voice, as it were, and to help reach good decision, as it were. So that's an interesting one, really. But the reluctance, the same. telling us that they've got what? J&J, Pfizer, Sinopharm, and I thought, I'm not sure whether availability is the issue here, sir. I think it's the reluctance of the people. That's the issue, not availability.
You know, this whole kind of, you know, was it vaccine hesitancy or whatever it's called? It's still there. And, you know, just because some of the officials might want to wish it away, ostrich thing again, doesn't mean it's going to go away. But if it's not going away, what are the reasons for it? And how do you get around it, or how do you convince people? And, you know, I look around, I don't see enough to persuade me that they're doing enough to persuade those who are reluctant as to why this is for the benefit, other than saying, you know, the WHO says it's good for you, so there, take it. You know.
Adi, I think they face an impossible task. Isn't it interesting, Adi, that historically, really, one can go back far enough, sort of people who effected sort of the radical change that the societies needed had to use force.
Yeah, in many.
Isn't it very interesting with that? People will just never change willingly. It's an extraordinary thing that we are trying to do here.
Right.
Trying to bring, as I said, radical development amidst this democratic mollycoddling.
Well, indeed, but what interests me is that why the reluctance here in the Gambia and not in some of our neighboring countries? What is so special about here?
But I wonder how many have had 70%? I mean, Cape Verde, that's a very different one. That's an interesting
put that
one.
Aside.
Putting that one aside.
Sure.
One wonders how many.
Some have reached 60.
60 and stuff like
that's
that.
That's right, but none close to us have reached 70. But certainly in Africa, there are a few, I think Algeria.
Absolutely. This is a very interesting question. Curious here, because when we go back, we knew that the education system was all gone, even when it came to authority, because Yahya was behaving, that president was behaving in such a way, because remember the theory, that perhaps how you are politically, then the people, the citizens begin to adapt to suit that. So what he was so rude to authority.
Sure.
You know how many elders he will call them and custom. He was rude to authority.
Sure.
Kids were growing up seeing that rudeness.
Sure.
And it was a whole generation, as it were. And everybody really more or less knew what he was, you know, what he did what he wanted.
Quite.
So that self-centeredness, you even see it in people.
Yeah.
So we were adapting to a kind of polity in which, why should I care about this, or why should I care about that? And now transition 5 years. What is 5 years?
5 years is a drop in the ocean.
That's it. And the people in power now, let's be honest, relatively inexperienced in politics. We all know how to run a state, how difficult that is. So this is like the debris, I call it Yahya Jammeh's generation. Education down, social authority down. The whole fabric of society was really destroyed. So a lot of people don't really care about authority. They don't know how long it will take for authority to regain that trust and respect. Authority lost respect.
Sure, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. But thank you for that, Mr. Burge. We've got two stories. We've got just under 5 minutes. Entrepreneurship and hospitality training centers. Foundation stones have been laid. And this is, of course, in the hope that there's going to be employment for those who go through these centers. Well, is there going to be? Anyway, have a look.
Before the coming of the bridge, there used to be very serious or very meaningful economic activities at the ferry crossing then. So with the advent of the bridge, those who were engaged in those commercial activities, of course, automatically have to find other means of commercial engagement. So, and if in the absence of that, we expect that we need to come with innovative ideas to see how we address the situation in coping, providing a coping mechanism for the youth particularly and women that were busy along that way. And this project is basically based on that.
This project is aimed at that. Women and youth who used to do trade along the bridge. Mr. Mborj, again, maybe not enough time to spend on this one, but hospitality and entrepreneurship centers. So I guess some of them were doing petty trade. They were kind of entrepreneurs. And so now you're trying to transition that to hospitality, assuming that there'll be somebody that you're going to offer your services to.
And then when we discussed this, I think the question we asked was, how did they decide that it's going to be entrepreneurship and it's going to be on hospitality?
Sure.
A lot of people are very entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial temperament, without having been trained this entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So everywhere you turn now, there's a lot of talk. It's all over the place. We must train them entrepreneurship, train them this. A lot of people, entrepreneurship is one of those things that how much does this cognitive training deliver?
Exactly.
How much does personality, character? I mean, we are told when you look at the literature, it's mixed. So we are forcing this way of training. We are forcing this entrepreneurship. I'm not sure whether we are going about it the right way.
Sure. As I said, we don't have much time on it, but I think that's a very, very good point. And perhaps we should end on that point so we can go on to our last story, and this one is a bit of a football fairy tale. Greater Tomorrow FC, what a lovely name. They've made it to the first division. Have a look.
They started as a football academy more than a decade ago, with under 10, under 15 and under 17 age categories. They were registered as a Nawetan team in Brikama. After a few seasons, they were promoted to the third division, subsequently to the second division last season. Benjamin Eze explains.
Our first target in the second division is for us to remain.
And there you are, in the second division. All they wanted to do was to consolidate. And what happens? They got promoted to the first division. They came second, and when they were second with 1 game to go, they were 8 points ahead of the team in third. So it didn't matter that they had that 1 match to go. But as I said at the beginning there, a fairy tale, I said at the top of the program. An amazing story, just over a decade, and they've made that shift from, Nawetan to now to the first division.
I read the story, I couldn't believe it.
Sure.
Academy,
Yeah.
Nawetan,
Yeah.
third division,
Yeah.
second division, now first.
First.
This is an entrepreneur. You're growing. You started something that is growing.
This is it.
The sustainability,
Sure.
the improvement. This is an example that everybody should look at and say, this is exactly it.
Yeah,
this is
sure.
what we are looking for, that doggedness.
Yes, indeed.
Staying the course.
That's
I
right.
want to improve, keep on improving, time and time again. What an extraordinary example.
Fantastic story. So Greater Tomorrow, we wish you all the best in the first division, and we hope you survive and thrive. And just leaves for me to say, Mr. Mboch, thank you for your interjections. And to the viewers, as ever, thank you for sticking with us. Until the next time, goodbye.